Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, the House Communications and Technology Subcommittee and the Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee got together, held a big hearing on big tech and misinformation on the web. And you go, wow, this, I don't know, 5-6 years too late? But hey, better late than never. Maybe we can stop some of the Russian misinformation and some of the hacking and some of the other stuff next time. Maybe next time. I'm here to share some thoughts on the big subcommittee duo meeting hearing and all the fireworks that went on. I've asked Erin Simpson to come talk with us. She's the Associate Director for Tech Policy at the Center for American Progress, their website, americanprogress.org. Erin, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, so good to be here. I watched these 6 hours, so you don't have to.
Thank goodness. So the barn burner that this was going to be with all of the the smoking guns and all of the really really magnanimous characters, all the personalities, all of that. How'd it go?
Well, Rick, the call is coming from inside the House with election 2020. We were all hyped up about foreign disinformation in 2016. We had a lot of hearings about that. A lot went down. Russia interfered. And this year, it was really a domestic battle. We had so many domestic groups pushing disinformation about the election, about coronavirus and the election, not just leading up, not just during, but then after, right? The post-election period was a disaster. President Trump was delegitimizing the election. People were pushing that online. And then this all culminated on the tragic events of January 6th. We had 5 people lose their lives. You had the QAnon shaman, on the floor in the House. And so today, this was Congress's follow-up, right? And a lot of Congress people and their staff, they were, this was a traumatic experience for them. You had people cowering and hiding, up in the gallery. And so this has been long awaited just because you were finally going to have, members of both committees really coming and with a lot of fire to grill the CEOs of Google, Twitter, and Facebook about why they didn't do more, what happened, what went wrong, and what they're doing now. And so we've had, 17 hearings maybe in the last 3 or 4 years with this sort of group of tech bros. And it, like so many before, was incredibly disappointing. So we had a longer Congress people who, the hearings have gotten better on the Congress's side, right? They are really getting in there. They're talking not just about, say make money. It's let's really get in there and talk about your algorithmic amplification. Let's not just talk about your content moderation. Let's talk about your product design. Let's talk about not just what you take down from other people, but how your algorithms, your product choices are actually spreading itself.
Yep.
And that was a really big shift. And we saw a lot of that today as they tried to sort of, pin these 3 CEOs and try to get concessions and promises for how to do better in the future, because what we're seeing now is just not enough.
No, because the business model is to continue to feed you what you want and feed you the most extreme of, especially if someone's paying to get to your eyeballs. That's their business model. It's not what's most popular per se. It's not what your friends are saying. It's what they're feeding you to keep your eyeballs there, so that when you click on those notifications, they can keep banging you with, hey, take a look at me, take a look at me. It's like a constant drug. And they've a friend of mine likes to say, Fox News and Facebook have done to our parents, our parents and us, what we were claiming and our parents were claiming video games would do to kids. It's what they've done.
Yeah, it's gotten really bad. And I think some of the last year, we got a lot of great activists who are doing research and a lot of really intrepid journalists who have been really getting on these guys and getting sort of internal documents. And so this is the first time we've really had just such blatant confirmation everywhere that they know their products are radicalizing. Tech Transparency Project shows that Facebook is growing white supremacy. Karen Howe, this great piece at the MIT Tech Review a couple of weeks ago showing that 64% of extremist groups on Facebook, according to their own research, were pointed there by Facebook. And when they found that out, they're like, all right, we got to get this team that's researching this off. We're going to move these teams away. This is going to hurt our bottom line.
Yeah.
And we hear these stories again and again, right? Wall Street Journal, right before the election, reported that Zuckerberg knew that there were tools they could do to tamp down the disinformation and all the hate content they were seeing in the feeds. But it disproportionately impacted right-wing publishers. And they didn't want to see how it looked.
No, that's
so
an excellent point.
It
because, I've said for years, we've always had crazy people. We've always had people who wore the tinfoil hats. We've always had people who believed in these wild, bizarre conspiracies. Facebook just gave them the means to find each other and allow them to organize into a much bigger group and have a much more powerful voice than they actually are, which is why, you saw, I don't think it's as big a population as our media likes to throw out there, but they are loud, they are radical, and now they're organized.
Right. Yeah. They're very organized, and just the difference in megaphone, right? I mean, we were worried about the Telegraph and how that was going to, spread wild ideas. Like this happens every time. But with social media, the scale is unprecedented. The targeting is unprecedented. And, say YouTube is going to hold your hand and walk you down, extremist rabbit holes going deeper and deeper and deeper. And so, it's not just that, we have folks who are going to believe disinformation and misinformation. We have folks who, are pushing disinformation, be that domestic groups or Russia. We also have these companies that are profiting off of all of this and building tools to supercharge this. And it was great to finally see Congress kind of try to get at that. Well, wait a second, you're profiting off of this. What are your tools doing around this? And you could tell that they weren't quite ready to, share more about a lot of those things, right? It's like this black box for them. Our team has been really working on Spanish language disinformation. So this was, longstanding problem, especially on Facebook. And it got worse during 2020, but it got worse even after the election, right? So around coronavirus and around the election, there's been terrible problem about Spanish language disinformation. Some of Facebook's labels, like Spanish language post, English language label about the election. We've still got, militia calls to arms in Spanish that Facebook hasn't taken down, even though us and our partners at the National Hispanic Media Coalition at Free Press, we've been flagging them for months, right? And so we launched Ya Basta Facebook, Enough Facebook, to try to get them to take more action. And, we had a lot of help today from Reps Chakowski, Reps Cardenas, Rep Soto, to really push Zuckerberg specifically on why you're not doing enough about Spanish language disinformation. Because often when they think about this, they think about, Spanish language internationally, right? But, there are 40 million Spanish-speaking people in the United States. We have the second largest Spanish-speaking population in the world, right? And so the idea that there's not cultural competency to understand that there's a specific U.S. Spanish-speaking political context that you need to be in the know, that you need to be translating posts about militias correctly. That's a huge issue for us, and their answers were really disappointing today.
So now I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking about some of my Trump-supporting conservative friends who are going to say you sound conspiratorial. Like there's some invisible hand back there that's controlling all this. There's somebody pulling the strings. That there's some nefarious plot to spread all this misinformation. I'll go first, and I'll say there is. But I'm curious what your thought is.
Well, folks have been spreading disinformation since the days of Napoleon. He would send people ahead of him to say how good he did in battle before he even got there for battle. And today, it's a profitable business. Like you've got groups that are just in this for the money. The Macedonian teenagers who can put up wild posts, clickbait that gets your attention, and they're making money. You got those groups. You got people doing this politically. I mean, we watched the Proud Boys storm the Capitol with our own eyes, right? Like, are they conspiracying to try to overthrow the government? But sure, they're believing the conspiracy theories. It's a big distributed problem in some ways, right? There's all kinds of different groups, different interest groups. They got their own thing. Maybe you run a blog that spreads disinformation about pregnancy cures, but people just love it, right? Like, pregnancy, holistic, natural things, like stuff that's not based on science. And there's a whole community around that kind of stuff. There's a whole community around anti-vax information. And it's tough, right? Because, you want to approach people with some understanding, right? Because we've all got that person in our lives who maybe, believes something that's just super false, and you're worried about them because of it, right? You're worried that it's going to hurt them. They've gone on the QAnon rabbit hole, maybe. And so, you want to have a lot of grace, right? And try to like meet them where they are and understand, why do you believe this in the first place? Because a lot of these people, it's a community feeling, right? Like people are working together online to, decode QAnon breadcrumbs. There's a lot of community feelings. And so I'm not, in terms of who's doing what, like this is a problem in many ways for all of us. But the three people running billion-dollar companies who are profiting off of all of this while the rest of us are trying to figure it out, that's who's on display today. And heck, I would love more data too about what's going on so that we can, make even more empirically driven claims in addition to what we already have.
Yeah. So let me ask you this now. We know we've identified what the problem is, and I think we agree that Facebook's algorithm and the constant being banged with notifications and all of this stuff that's funneling you into a very narrow pathway, obviously to make money off of you. We know that's the problem. How do you fix that? Because people are going to say, hey, Erin, this is the free market. People want that content. The business is providing it for them. Consumers are getting what they want. The business is getting what they want. What's wrong with this? So democracy dies. Capitalism wins.
Oh, man. If this is capitalism, this is such a perverted version of the free market. When you've got companies that are monopolies in their own digital markets, and they've been trying to kill off every competitor for years or acquire every competitor for years, right? We don't have the competition. We don't have the choice that we want in social media markets at all. And that's why, you're starting to see some really encouraging signs that regulators are finally embracing those historic roots of antitrust and saying, what? Like these are big problems of corporate concentration, not just of economic concentration, but of informational power, of political power. And this is something we need to do something about. So the state attorneys general cases, the DOJ and FTC cases against Google, against Facebook, we've got pending cases against Apple and Amazon, investigations ongoing. Those are really encouraging signs because one part of this, just to say, this is not an inevitable result of the market. Digital markets are prone to tipping, sure, but we've got a lot of evidence already of anti-competitive conduct. And we saw some of that in the great House Antitrust Subcommittee report this summer. And so we know that's ongoing. We're eager for these investigations, but they could take years, right? So what do you do in the interim? Because those outcomes are not sure. We need to be using all the tools available, investigatory, regulatory oversight, whatever we have. Can we investigate dark patterns? Can we compel new data to understand these problems better? Do we need to be thinking about legislative fixes around toxic business models? And I think we do all of those things and more tools, right? We need to be thinking about our government doesn't have all of the tools it needs to be overseeing, understanding, and fixing some of these technical problems either before they're happening or as they're happening, right? Because antitrust, as we've seen, or they're saying now, as we saw with the Microsoft in the early 2000s, 10 years too late.
Yeah, no, you're right on. But to your capitalism point, we disagree a little bit. I think this is exactly what capitalism is. Because, as I learned at capitalism, the big fish always eats the little fish. That's just how it goes. And eventually the end of the road is monopoly. The big fish eating all of the little fish. So that is what unregulated capitalism to me is. I could be wrong, but that's what I think it is. Now, for the government's problem is we're always 10 years behind because they're not allowed to innovate. They're not allowed to keep up with the times, and we don't have the expertise to keep up with these models and this stuff. So how do we go and grab that stuff so that we can keep up with, because the market, this thing's always changing. By the time I figure out what the next social media platform are, there's 3 more I've missed.
Well, our team is working on ideas to help the government catch up, right? And we're going to be publishing some papers this year about how do we make the government capable of doing this ongoing for all online services, not just social media now, but what do we think about emerging technologies? How are we going to get around AI? We don't want to be behind the ball on all of these other things. And so part of it's just the brute force. We need to make regulatory bodies capable, because without democratic oversight of these issues, we're just stuck with whatever market problems are going to naturally arise, right? And so, we need the full set of antitrust changes. We need antitrust enforcers to be aggressive. Some of the Biden picks have been good, so that's optimistic. We need new competition policies, really robust. We need the spirit of antitrust's original purpose. We need to bring that back, right? These are the giants of our time. We got to go get them. And we need to fix the regulatory tools, because if we can't regulate technology, we can't regulate, data products, we can't regulate the future. And so that's just something that come heads or tails, we just have to figure out.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. But, what do you say to the person who then says, well, you're going to censor what I have to say. I want to say these racist, idiotic things. What do you say to the person who says you're censoring me?
Oh gosh. I mean, the part of the part of the internet that we're arguing about, the social media part where we're having these content moderation battles, that's just the tip of the iceberg for all of the internet companies and technology companies that are really controlling important parts of our economy and our everyday lives. For the folks who are worried about censorship, of course, I'm also worried about censorship. I don't see content moderation that social media companies are doing as that at all. Because sometimes, we get so into, a really flat version of the First Amendment that thinks protecting freedom of expression is just about protecting the most speech, maximal speech, right? But actually, freedom of expression is, you can be silenced by having your speech drowned out. You can be silenced by having your speech harassed. And historically, the powers of the First Amendment have always disproportionately accrued to people in power, right? Companies with a lot of money, white people like us, men, like people who aren't harassed as much online, like people of color are disproportionately, left out of those same benefits. And so we need to look at protecting freedom of expression online holistically. And that's not always about maximal speech, because I think even folks who are worried about, say, censorship are worried about that from the government and worried about that from companies, right? They're worried about that from, people shouting them down online. Like, this is a dynamic situation. And now that we're living in sort of digital online public sphere, we've just got to rethink how is this going to happen? And I think there's so many different ways to do that. Competition's an answer. Better democratic oversight is an answer. We've got a lot of things we need to work on there.
Yeah, see, I've always been, in my view on this is for the longest time has been, everybody should be who they are online. None of these hiding behind an avatar, none of these making up, false accounts. You are who you are, and you are verified as who you are, and you're responsible for the dumb stuff you say. Because I talk to people all the time. I go, if you were standing in front of me, would you say that to my face? And invariably, nobody's going to say the stuff that they say to each other online, to each other's face, because we just don't do that. I mean, there are some, and you deal with that. But for the most part, the ugliness and the kind of hatred and the kind of vitriol that we see, I think some of it could be solved with, there's no hiding who you are.
Yeah, I take your point about sometimes online we're just so much worse, right? We're the worst version of ourselves. But I'll also say that anonymity online is super important, right? When we think about protecting, journalists or marginalized people or labor organizers who are trying to communicate and not be surveilled by the government or companies, that anonymity is important sometimes, right? Actually I think anonymity is cool. So I guess I disagree with you a little bit there, that there's definitely a role for anonymity, and that helps sometimes freedom of expression for people who are persecuted or targeted or can't speak out otherwise. But does it also empower the trolls? You're right. Yes, it does, Rick. Yeah.
No, I come back to, I think you have to hold people accountable for the actions that they take. We can blame, Twitter and Facebook and all that, and they have a lot of blame in this because of their algorithms.
Right.
But some of the hateful, really ugly stuff that you see that maybe they don't take down fast enough or whatnot, the person's just going to spew it again.
Absolutely, right? These are old problems. We were talking to some organizers in Georgia, the New Georgia Project, who, did amazing work around the Georgia election and then the special election. And they said, you know what? Before there was the internet, they put billboards in our communities, in Black communities, with the wrong day to vote on it, right? No matter the means, no matter the method, people who want to do bad things are going to figure it out.
That's an excellent point. For more information, where can folks go to find out what happened today and where we need to be going? Any place in particular?
Oh, we're AmericanProgress.org. We're putting out a statement on it. And we put a great Spanish disinformation action plan out with Free Press and the National Hispanic Media Coalition. So you can find that on our website. And I'll go ahead and tweet it at the show as well.
Good stuff. And we'll make sure that we get it out on our social media platforms. Erin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you, Rick. Keep on keeping on.
Good stuff. Appreciate the time. Erin Simpson, Associate Director of Tech Policy there at the Center for American Progress. The website, make sure you check that out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.